Here I am today with one of my very favorite people that I rarely get to see but wish that I lived beside, Father Gregory Boyle. He is the founder of Homeboy Industries, the largest gang intervention, rehabilitation, and re-entry program in the world. He is the author of books that make me cry in public or in my car, like Tattoos on the Heart, Barking to the Choir, The Whole Language, and his latest, Cherished Belonging. Father Boyle, I am obsessed with you. I will keep that to a minimum during our time together, but I've been so looking forward to this.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
I came to visit you last year, like everybody wants to come visit you, and I got this beautiful tour of places where people take classes or get therapy or tattoo removal, and this big crowd of people waiting outside of your office because it reminded me of the perfectly old-timey the priest is in.
You were in the headquarters, and so we have 13 social enterprises. Some of them operate out of there, the cafe, merchandise, the bakery. And then we have all these other...
Like in the airport, like in LAX.
In the LAX. We had two, and then they shut down all the eateries and American Airlines for some reason to rebuild. And then silkscreen, electronic recycling.
Wow.
We do a thing called Homeboy Threads, which is we get all this fabric and toss away stuff from Guess and all these different huge, and then we repurpose them so that they don't end up in a landfill.
Yeah.
So 10,000 folks a year walk through our doors trying to reimagine their lives. We're not there for those who need it, just those who want it.
Yeah.
So, they're all kind of looking around and they begin the process, drug test, orientation, interview. Yeah, so a lot of people.
I mean, there's like a story of how it could go. Someone could describe this ministry and go, well, this is a story about people who come to you with potential. You would never use the language of potential.
Never. Yeah. I mean, in fact, I had a board member, a great guy who has since left us, but he always said, you see a gang member and all you see is potential. But then I thought, no, that's not, maybe that's just imprecise, but I see goodness. That's what I want to see and hope to see and intend to see. Yeah. But potential is kind of like, you have potential, you don't so much have it, can't really see it in you.
Yeah.
But the goodness is kind of the pervasive, unshakable thing that everybody has, And then that's all you need to see, and that's all you need to reflect back. And that's all anybody needs to put one foot in front of the next is to say, oh, I'm unshakably good. And then resilience is born of that, and a kind of a muscular hope is born of that. And
I wrote a book called Good Enough because I was thinking about our culture of exhausting perfectionism. But this is a deeper level than that. This is this sort of substratum of what makes us human. For people who don't have a sense of how you're coming in strong on an argument where you could say, well, there's nothing here but violence and decay and every good reason to believe that people are not fundamentally good.
Yeah. I said this at a LA Times Festival of Books. I don't know if you've ever been to that. The two principles that we embrace at Homeboy is everybody's unshakably good and we belong to each other. And then I said, do I think every vexing, complex social dilemma would disappear if we embraced those two? And I said, yes, I do. Well, the whole audience, a huge auditorium, burst into laughter, which kind of startled me. And then I said, yes, I do. And I do. I think it's kind of the starting point.
Yeah.
Otherwise, how do you get beyond behavior and see as God sees?
Yeah.
And I don't have any doubt at all that God sees the unmistakable goodness and how we belong to each other. So it's not waiting, to measure up to somehow can we grow in goodness. Growing in love makes sense to me. But growing in goodness is, I don't think God knows what we're talking about.
Because you'll use healing language in a way I really enjoyed. Well, you'll say, help me out. It would be like, someone will come to you and say, well, I want to change. And you say like, it's not that I think that you're capable of change, but I think that that you could heal here.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Well, part of it is like we've been punishing wound, ergo mass incarceration. But what if we sought to heal it? So that's the kind of the distinction, rather than, then you can start to imagine the day when prisons are empty and police are obsolete, and you go, oh, we shifted. We've decided to recognize brokenness for what it is, that it's not bad people doing bad things. It's people who are wounded and need, healing.
What story comes to mind lately of somebody who you got to watch heal in some way?
I ran into this guy, Louie, who I hadn't seen in a long time. He yelled my name and he ran across the street, big, huge guy. And I hadn't seen him probably I think he said 8 years he's been working at this air conditioning factory in Montebello, which is east of downtown.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what had happened to him. And that was the job we got him. He was with us for 18 months. I remember on his last day, of his 18 months, he said, can I speak to the other trainees? Nobody's ever said that. Sometimes they'll say goodbye and just kind of a thing. No, he wanted to give a speech. And so he had the microphone and crying. And he ended it by saying, all of you are diamonds covered in dust. You can wipe your dust off here. And he did. He was, he used to be drug dealer to the stars. And he used to tell me the stars, I would go, I don't need to hear this, this is too much information. But he was a big bag gang member. Wow. He said all he wanted to do was be the baddest gang member and the biggest drug dealer. And then he kind of turned all that around and found another way. But he found community, a culture that really held him, which mattered.
When people come in, they don't always just not know each other. They might know each other for terrible reasons.
Oh, yeah. There isn't anybody there who doesn't have multiple enemies, rivals, and real visceral kinds of. And sometimes they can talk about that. They can say, hey, remember that time you almost ran me over? Remember that time you shot at me and I was with my kids? All these things that are really hard. But they manage to get to a place where they can file it away somewhere and move on and have a bond that's really deeper than anything they've ever known.
What do you think? Do you think it's just like small acts of trust that kind of like, is it like that's the softening that takes place that makes the bond deeper?
I always talk about the one false move God, as opposed to the no matter whatness of God. And so you want people to kind of embrace this. We moved way beyond second chances a long time ago. So we're like in the ninth, somewhere in the ninth range, and so people know that. And that's part of the culture of, everybody's going to make mistakes. Rehab happens. Another homie today was texting me, I feel people are going to look down on me because he has a heroin addiction. And we caught it. And we said, let's do rehab and come back. But the hardest part of them is people now look down on him. Said, no, everybody wants you to get well, and wants you back. So, that's what you hope. If you keep sending out that signal and everybody's giving a dose, not just me, not the therapist. We used to think that healing was go to a therapist once a week at Homeboy. Now nobody thinks that way. It's everybody holds a piece. Everybody's supplying a dose, from the security guy out in the parking lot. Everybody's intentional in how they greet people and see them.
I tried to replicate a story that you wrote about and I failed, but I got a couple of the good lines when I was trying to tell it to my best friend Chelsea over the phone. But it was a story where somebody was really tough to deal with and had that kind of like conditional, like this relationship is over feeling. And you were trying very hard to convince them that like there's nothing they can do that means that they can't come back.
Is this about a bridge?
It is.
Yeah.
I wondered if you could.
Yeah, well, it's just a guy, Chino, who, drinking became the thing, and you have to go to rehab, and, we're not going to, and so you kind of let them go, and you kind of say, do 30 days, and we'll come right back. And he wasn't having it. And so a lot of time passed, and he just kind of texted me again. He said, can you give me some money? And I said, Chino, I love you. I've known you for 20 years, since you were a kid. But if I gave you money, I wouldn't be helping you. So I know that, and that rehab is what you need. And you've burned your bridges with all your family, all your friends. You will never burn your bridge with me. I sinned. He wrote me back, fuck your bridge. It's one of my favorite things. And so I told everybody on my staff, who are all gang members. And then that became our kind of catchphrase with each other. They'd hug me and they'd go, fuck your bridge. And
get in here.
And I was just,
tears wiped away.
I was getting verklempt, So.
I like that.
Yeah. So I hadn't thought of that in a long time.
There's nothing that's going to keep you away.
Nothing. And I was trying to do this big, no matter whatness speech.
Is this like stereo above your head?
Yes, exactly. And but he wasn't having it, and it just made me laugh. But I also, it was one of those exercises of because things do sting. I mean, you can't deny it. Where somebody will reject or tell you to, shove it. And then, so that was, for me, it was an exercise because I knew this kid so well and loved this kid. And so you let the sting in, like praise and blame. You let it in for just a moment. Yeah. You don't ever let it, oh my God, he said this to me. And as opposed to, when I've done this before, well, let me tell you where I've been for you, and then it's a chronicle of.
Yes. You called it the litany?
Yeah, the litany. Yeah.
I've always called it the list.
Yeah.
And I always notice that I have a list.
List is more accurate.
Well,
than
the list is like.
Because I don't sing it.
No, the litany is funnier though, because for people who are not religious, might not know that it is the whole recitation of all of the good works of God.
Yeah.
A lot of sacred hands.
Yeah.
But the list I notice comes out if someone doesn't know me very well and say they bring up a story and you want to be like, well, like what's the shorthand for, this person at my work screwed me over, or I'm mad at my parent, and then you have the story, and the story is always this calcified wound.
But it's a human temptation. But Pema Chodron, do you read her? She's a Buddhist monk, I guess. And she's great. And she always talks about catching yourself. That's part of her practice. And so that's where you have to catch yourself. You go, you want to tell somebody to, and the horse you rode in on kind of thing. And you catch yourself. You go, no, I'll just let this go. I find that really hard.
My best version is I just try to make sure at least the list is new.
Yeah.
So I want to clear out the old items.
Revise the list.
If any of that gets forgiven, good for all of us.
Yeah.
And see if I can create some new grievances.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not going to remember exactly who said it, but it was something like, in thinking about the image of God, this God who is conditional, the God who doesn't necessarily let us come back right away, the God who wants us to do better. You quoted somebody saying something like, why do we always keep drawing pictures of God that scare us?
Well, that's Meister Eckhart.
Oh,
yeah. It's a lie, any talk of God that doesn't comfort you. I was on a panel once where it's kind of the, at the margins with the poor, like if it doesn't hurt, you're probably doing it wrong. And I went, oh, and about costing you. And I just don't buy that stuff. I mean, I wouldn't trade my life for anybody's. And I know it's where the joy is. That's why you feel vaguely fraudulent, because people go, oh my God, it must be so hard. Even here, people do this, and it's kind of a how do you do it thing. And I go, well, gosh, they say it like it's hard.
I feel, identically about very sick people.
Yeah.
It's such it feels like it should be a burden to hear the story.
Yeah.
But every time it really feels like they gave me a gift.
Oh my gosh.
And then there is a marrow of the universe feeling. I won't say it's easy, but it feels beautiful.
Yeah.
And that part, I feel like there's an endless love for that.
Well, it's kind of fullness, even if it isn't joy. It's you feel like you're inhabiting some
yes.
Hidden wholeness, a thing that sort of was not available before, brought to you by somebody who's suffering. But it's a way of accompaniment where you're kind of feeling what a privilege, what a gift, as you say.
I'm going to argue for you and against you for a second. This costly love thing, because I think I would say, yes, love should hurt you, only because I'm so tired of the upper middle class spirituality as part of a self-improvement program stuff. And that's usually how they decide whether a spiritual practice is good, is if it inherently has therapeutic benefits. And I think this has been, the 70s ruined a lot of things.
Yeah.
Polyester, fine.
Yeah.
But I think of that really, we've had about 50 years of American culture being obsessed with the idea that religion or spirituality or anything true is supposed to make you feel good.
Yeah, but part of the thing is, the harder thing is the better thing, which I say, well, no, it's actually just the harder thing. I think the problem is with that kind of notion of, will I be, the sort of the therapeutic process.
Yeah.
The point of it is, it can't be about you. And the thing about burnout, and people go, oh my God, I guess I'm just too compassionate. I had no idea that I was this compassionate. No, you let it become about you. People, we should rest, and you should sleep, and you should exercise, and you should do those things. But if it's about success, if it's about, somehow, people completing, outcomes that are verifiable, and we had this many kids graduate, and this many homies never went back to prison. We do that kind of stuff. People are always evidence-based outcomes, but I don't believe in it. At least I don't believe in it as an engine that drives things. You just be as loving as you can be, and kind of leave it at that. But if a senior staff comes to me and says, I need a month off because I guess I just let myself be too compassionate. And I said, no, you allowed it to become about you. And you're not allowing yourself to be reached by people or to receive people or to allow your heart to be altered, which is the whole thing. So I think the key that prevents that from becoming displaced and disordered is it can't be about you. And so even as people are going, is this going to get me to whatever, nirvana or
I think more
health?
Optimization, some kind of replacement for a mindfulness app.
Yeah, except that people's notion of God is so linked to the bad parent, who is and all this stuff. Mirabai, I was telling you about her. She always says once you know the God of love, you fire all the other gods. And so the other gods are the ones that are operative, saying, it's all about you and make sure that you're happy. But that kind of journey that you described is really, the goal there is happiness.
Yes.
But the goal in going to the margins and allowing the folks at the margins to make you different,
Yes.
the goal is joy, that everybody inhabiting it in an exquisitely mutual way. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Studying happiness culture has been a very interesting way to see how we've secularized the prosperity gospel. I just spent so long looking at theologies of show and tell, where you do certain things, you deserve certain things, and then God is supposed to hold up God's end of the bargain and give you the happy family and the health and I see, especially like women struggling under the weight of so much show and tell. And it really has dominated almost all cheap paperbacks, almost everything at Target or Walmart, or like anywhere you get an affordable book. It's going to tell you a 5-step plan to do something like this.
Yeah.
So I was trying to understand more about we can have greater capacity for joy without accidentally swapping it out for some of our conceptions of happiness. And I've really understood joy as a gift. I've really understood joy as something that happens like way out where nobody expects it, with people who are not cultural winners. I've understood it intermittently, like an anvil sometimes. But I guess I wasn't sure if we could expect joy. And so I just was kind of letting it happen, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, like inadvertent.
Because I don't want to then say, well, then I can have joy and then spend so much time staring at my own emotions, worrying that I'm making it like another form of show and tell, I guess.
Yeah.
But the randomness of joy kind of was teaching me something, I thought, about how there's not like an economy here that I get to predict. It's just try to live in love, and then you really get the bonus feature of joy sometimes.
Yeah.
Does that sound
Yeah,
right?
it does, but except that, the prerequisite is somehow to move into some other-centered universe where you're actually greeting the other person. Like the homies always say at Homeboy, they're used to being watched. They're not used to being seen. In order to actually see people, you really have to have some kind of ego-less, as much as you can. I don't know how you move out of yourself. So the minute you're stuck in some kind of, mild darkness, the antidote is to just, leap into a concern for somebody else. And then, you move from other-centered, and part of your own practice is to arrive at being loving-centered. And then you go, oh my God, loving is my home. And now I'm never going to be homesick. And that becomes, the place of joy. But that's why practice is so inextricably connected to being able to, know my joy, yours, your joy complete, where you kind of, you can catch yourself, you're cherishing with every breath you take, you're not, I don't know, you're not allowing yourself to get caught up in the storylines is another thing that Pema Chodron says. You get caught up in the storylines. So you're rehashing grievances and it is show and tell. How do you move beyond that? There's a singularity to who God is. God is just loving you. And then people will say, well, isn't God pleased with some things and displeased with other things? No, too busy just adoring you. And then that's kind of disquieting. People go, God, here I've been measuring.
Yeah.
And God is saying, what's all the measuring about?
Yeah.
I
have to admit, I've been having a little bit of a hard time lately with sin, like really thinking about it, because I'm a very doctrinally boring person. We do bad things. I mean, I know there's different atonement theories, but there's a wide variety of acceptable atonement theories. I think it's because most of the people who are so worried about it, like, I really can't see what they've done that's so very wrong that it takes up that much time.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly it's taking up way more of the church service than I feel like it needs to.
Yeah. Yeah.
It kind of made me wonder if my understanding of sin is just that it's out of order. Like, you had this story about this man who he'd done some really terrible things, and then eventually he got a house. And when he got the house, he said, he was talking to you, and he said, I can't believe that this is the life that I have. And it made him start to think about all the things he'd ever done wrong. And at that moment, you like catch him to like restore him to a feeling of loving himself again.
Yeah.
And I kind of wondered, isn't it kind of wild that maybe confession can happen so much after restoration, as opposed to the normal order of stuff, which is like, you've fallen short, say you're sorry, God will repair, see you later, go out into the world. And that's a long rant called, I Think I'm Not Presbyterian.
Yeah. Well, I remember that story. I think this was Fernie who said, in the middle of the night, called me and said, you know, for the first time in my life, I feel bad for all the things that I've done. So, I mean, just humanly, you kind of go, well, that feels healthy and right and good. You know, you want to move quickly beyond it, I think. But I think if you try to tap into the longing of God, you know, is it to be God hoping that will be less sinful or more joyful? And I think the joyful part is kind of the hope, you know.
I don't know how to like describe her. This fancy lady once listened to me talk for a bit about God and about life and whatever. And I have a very large shame and embarrassment button. So I always think that I've done something wrong. And she leaned forward and she put her hands on my cheeks and she said, Kate, I want you to believe in your own innocence. And I have to admit, I was like, I don't
know if I
don't really think that's the language I want at all.
Yeah.
But I felt like when I listen to you, I'm getting so much closer to, because I wouldn't say innocence, but I would say it's how I feel when I put my hands on the cheeks of my son with his sweet little giant face.
Yeah.
And I would know immediately, like, that flicker of perfection that is the gift of his life in the world.
You know, like the whole word sin, amartia, it's like miss the mark. Well, everybody thinks the mark is, oh, here's perfection in the middle of the, you know, bullseye.
Yeah.
Oh, and here, boy, you missed the mark. You're not there. But if you change the mark that we're missing to joy, that, what you just did, as you would tell your kid or somebody, that you could be more joyful if you kind of chose this. Mm-hmm. And I just want joy. Like this kid today texting me, he's an adult, but, you know, he doesn't want to go to rehab. And I'm going, oh, people just want you to be well and joyful. Nobody's judging you.
Yeah.
You know, big whoop, heroin. Half the people in the building, you know, were heroin addicts. What are you talking about? Let's go, you know? But it's not about stop doing the bad thing.
Yeah.
Or even shaking my head and, oh, I'm so disappointed that you relapsed.
Yeah.
It's all, you know, the mark that we miss is joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And don't settle for happiness when you could have joy. And don't settle for all these other things. It's about joy. Come on. You know, no judgment. It's just joy.
It's so emotional listening to you shrug at what other people are so ashamed of. I mean, like heroin, so what?
Yeah,
there's all
whoop.
kinds of...
I believe it was big whoop. Heroin, big whoop.
But there's so many versions of
there's
you.
There's a chapter heading somewhere in there.
Heroin, colon, big
Big
whoop.
whoop.
The father Boyle story.
No, it's more of a chapter. It wouldn't be the whole book.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah.
I like but the sweetness. I mean, the gift of a shrug. When you were, I mean, I just picture all the times when people must have been so scared to tell you, or I would be so scared to be. It's that feeling where you know you've done something, you're coming in late at night, and the idea that your parent would shrug instead of be furious at you.
Yeah. So a homie I know just hung himself. And this was just a few days ago. So I was talking to his, the mother of his children. They were separated. But, and she was saying, he's diagnosed as psychotic, she said. And, and they were trying to get him to take meds. And he was working a labor job. And then he did this. And she was, of course, distraught. But it was all about she said something like, before she could say suicide, she said, he did what Judas did. So I knew that it was so wrapped in, but in a kind of a shame. And yet I said, well, oh my gosh, he never chose this mental anguish. It chose him. Now I don't understand fully how mental anguish will choose somebody and not somebody else. Yeah. But he didn't choose it. So gang members taught me this so long ago, when probation officers are saying that kid's evil, don't waste your time on him, and I go, it was so clear at the gate that didn't make any sense. That you could see, the goodness and the hidden wholeness and all that and it's not potential, but it really is goodness. And then you see complex trauma, then you see real mental illness, and then you see stuck in a despair that they don't know how to lift their heads above it. So you see all that, and you see all the behavior that's connected to all that, and you go, oh, it's about a lethal absence of hope. Oh, it's about wound, not bad people. Yeah. Oh, it's about real mental health challenges that have led to all these things. But once you get, distracted by the behavior, you can't get underneath. The homies always say, find the thorn underneath, which I love, because there's always a thorn, though your first impression is, this guy's a dick, but then you go, no, what's this about? What language is this behavior speaking? And then all of a sudden you can roll up your sleeves and say, oh, I want to get at this. And then heal the wound and warm the heart,
Some of the things you say after somebody feels like they're unlovable anymore, I find it very emotional when you'll say something like, what a gift it would be to have a son like you.
I always do a variety of that.
It's lovely.
But I always feel it too. I never feel like it's not true.
No.
But I have versions of it.
Yeah.
I would have thought I had won the lottery if I got a son like you. And I always feel that very deeply, for all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. We long to hear these things that confirm even our tiniest hope that we are lovable enough, that we are the feeling that I've always noticed with people who are sick is that when the bad thing is everywhere, that you are the bad thing, that you are the thing that happens to people. Yeah. Instead of this beautiful, irreducibly lovable thing. I don't think we're entering into a next few years where people are exercising that kind of problem solving. Yeah. I think the amount of rhetoric that every other group is beyond hope, that there's no point in communicating anymore, there's no point in corporate problem solving. But meanwhile, I guess I always think about that list in scripture about who are you supposed to love? The widow, the orphan, the imprisoned, it just who's the list of the people who are going to need the shelter of everybody else problem solving, because some of us sometimes will need to be carried. And like, I guess I'm just worried that because people are putting less and less faith in our institutions as places where we can solve these problems, then we see the fallout from that almost immediately.
Yeah, except that, even on trust of institutions,
Yeah.
for me, it's kind of a flag that says, well, you're not yet whole. It's like you kind of.
Totally.
So, like, this is an odd thing that's happened in the last 5 years, mainly, or maybe a little bit before COVID as well, but mainly since COVID, where homies will come and say, oh my God, my grandfather died. He was 91. And he died in the hospital, and we think the hospital killed him. And I go, well, he was 91, and you kind of, but you know what I mean? There's that kind of distrust, absolute distrust of the medical profession. And then you're faced with this notion is somebody who's distrustful, savvy, or wounded? And I'm going with wounded. I think trusting people aren't naive. They're just healthier, and that's not a judgment call. That's a health assessment. If somebody is so distrustful, i.e. conspiracy theories and deep state or whatever the hell, you just go, no, this isn't savvy. This is somebody who's quite broken.
Yeah.
And our, invitation is to walk people home to wholeness. Not in a kind of a cheap kind of way, except that you may be whole, like my Heavenly Father is whole.
Yeah.
And so, anyway.
I think one way to get out of feeling scared about the chaos of institutions or about tragedy is to just assume that God has a plan that we just then have to find the clues and follow. And I have to say, I do find it really refreshing that you are not a God has a plan person.
Yeah.
Which brings me comfort and joy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe in God's plan. I believe in the singularity of God's loving us. And then that is this clarifying thing. That says, oh, okay, loves us so much that we, are being directed always to joy. And then, so that decides kind of what happens.
Yeah.
So, I believe God protects me from nothing and sustains me in everything. So then you can you stay anchored in the sustenance.
Yeah.
And then we become sustenance for each other. We become God's sustenance in the world.
Yeah.
That's all it's supposed to be. So I always wince, homies always say God has a plan. Everything happens for a reason. I don't believe any of those things, ever, And so sometimes if I have a moment where I can talk about it, with a homie, but I usually don't, because usually they're saying that at a moment of great upheaval,
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to say bullshit. It doesn't work that way. But when it's quieter, I will kind of say, yeah, I don't think that's how it works, because it gets us into trouble. Endless are the text messages with a photograph of a car that's totaled sent to me by a homie. And then he'll say, I was in this car with my 2 kids and we got out without a scratch. God is good. And I don't say it then, but if one of the kids had been killed, now what do you say? Because you can't have that both ways.
Yeah.
If God is good because you were saved, then God is a jerk.
Yeah.
If one of the kids is killed.
Yeah.
So it's a setup.
Yeah.
I have a friend who always says, we have to upset the setup, which I think is kind of a goal.
Yeah.
Where you can kind of say, no, let's chip away at this.
Yeah.
Because this gets us into trouble. And so I never say things like God is good. I go, well, what else would God be? Well, of course, But it also is kind of a reward structure.
Yeah.
God is good to me because I'm a thoroughly good person and I do all the right things. And now I have a big house, you know.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know how that works.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not so versed in the prosperity gospel except to say it's nonsense.
I like this hand.
Yeah.
I really want to understand, I want to be more joyful in the way that you're describing. It's like the byproduct of seeing through God's eyes for a second, from getting out of yourself, from letting go of the fear of not being enough or having enough, and just being a part of loving and then being loved by other people. It sounds like there is a magic that happens when we do that, that bubbles up into something like joy. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think because we're saved in the present moment, we have to be in the present moment, and it's breathe in the spirit that delights in your being and breathe it out because the world needs it. But a brief little story. I have one of my best friends is Paul Lipscomb, and I did his wedding, and we've known each other for half a century. And he has a 40-year-old daughter, and she's so severely disabled that she requires 24-hour care. And he can sign a little bit with her, and but total care, and she can walk with difficulty, and it's always falling, and her name is Catherine. Virtually every day, at the end of the day, he rocks her in this huge rocking chair for 40 years, since she was a little tiny baby, and to now she's 40. And we were on a Zoom, we connect once in a while, once a month, and he's rocking her, and she's a gangly 40-year-old woman. Yeah. And he says normally he will sing some kind of nonsensical ditty, and she just flails her arms and she screams with delight. She's not having it today. She's throwing the blanket over her head, and she's biting on her arm signs, and he goes, oh, and he does a kind of calculation in his head as to the time of the month. And he's going, I'm rocking my 40-year-old PMSE daughter. Yes. And I'm aware that there's nothing missing here. And that's it for me. It's an awareness that there's nothing, absolutely nothing missing in this present moment. Now, if you're, lamenting what happened yesterday, you're missing the moment. Or if you're fretful about what will happen tomorrow,
yeah, you're
missing the moment. But he says, here, there's nothing missing here, which I think is a mystical kind of understanding of things. And that's where the practice comes in, where you can stay anchored, breathing, here, cherishing, greeting, attentive, only here, nowhere else.
Yeah.
Really hard to do.
Yeah.
Cherishing people is not hard.
Yeah.
Remembering to cherish is really difficult. And so reminding ourselves to remember is kind of connected to our breathing.
Yeah. Fine. I guess I'll do that then.
Yeah. Well, I would say that settles it.
I really like you so much.
Oh, I think you're the best. I'm
grateful for you always. This was a delight.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
I was looking forward to this, and you didn't disappoint.
I